that bed ain't so easy to see anymore. It hasn't been used all that much.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So those kind of bedding areas, you kind of got to bump into or run into during the season, or start to use your head and start to figure things out and say, something's going on over here. So it's not something where I can give you this plan where spring and January you're going to go out and you're going to, because you're probably not going to be able to see it.
Right. Yeah, I think that the downwind of doe beds is important. I think on your sits, like a couple of properties that we hunt, it happened over time, but you start to observe, hey, there's always doe coming out of this area. They're coming out, they're coming out, they're coming out. Well, now the wind predominantly moves in this direction as it relates to those doe. And then you start to see how the land transitions between maybe one island in the marsh and another island. Or even in the example of hill country, in the land I used to hunt, where there's a doe bedding area. How does the wind blow through that? And think about how you've seen deer approach that bedding area or use it. And a couple of that spot that Dan gave an example of, I mean, there were 2 bucks that day that actually gave chase to that doe. A smaller one that was west of the island that I was on.
And that was satellite, because he couldn't bed where the big buck was.
Right.
And that was even a decent buck, wasn't it? A nice 10 point.
Right.
But it was smaller, much
Right.
smaller.
And I've kicked, since that time, walking onto that island, I've kicked a deer, presumably a buck, out of that satellite bed, which is kind of interesting. It was earlier in the season, so thicker and growing up, and there was a buck bedded in there. I assume it could have been a doe, but so for me it was starting to put the pieces together of the deer traffic during the rut, and then starting to say, okay, this is where I'm seeing most of the doe, and now this is starting to make sense based on wind and travel. How could that buck move through the property and smell and bed check all the doe?
Yeah, when you get back down to the we went off on kind of a tangent, but if
Right.
we go back to the basic question here, most of my rut tactics that are successful for mature bucks are not sitting funnels and stuff. That's not to say I don't do it for mature bucks. Occasionally, in one good example is hill country, is I will catch them on leeward hills cruising, but in very close proximity to bedding, to where they're bedding.
Yeah.
One like, if any of you have watched the New Hill video, and I'll probably get slammed for this because half of you are still waiting for it, but if you've watched the New Hill video, the buck I shoot by Andres, that's a non-pressured area, and that buck, I searched that whole freaking 800 acres for that buck, and he wasn't leaving one little tiny area, one little tiny leeward ridge, until after dark, and I had to slip into that leeward ridge and kill him. Is basically what it boiled down to.
Yeah.
Mature bucks are not running around through funnels in broad daylight on a regular basis. Sure, they make mistakes, but it's not commonplace. In order to kill mature bucks on a regular basis, you have to hunt them where they regularly are, not like everybody else is doing.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. It's still you can in general just go back to your same beast tactics. If you get on top of a bed and that buck's there, he's going to get up and move around in his business. But
think about that buck. I think it's the middle one. That's a spot where we're hunting during rut. I shot my buck. I'm watching over, and I could see a scrape from my tree that I didn't know was a scrape till I'm in my tree.
right.
But like you said earlier, we're always observing. And you see all these deer getting up in that swamp and going to that spot, right?
Yeah.
It is peak rut. They get to that spot, and before they get up on mainland, before they get to where people are, it's dark. But that spot was the key spot.
Right.
And you moved in there to hunt that buck based on me seeing it moving over there. And you got right over that scrape, and you could hear that buck get out of his bed. When did you shoot it? Right at the edge of darkness.
Right.
And it was typical beast fashion. He gets up a half an hour before closing. You shoot him at closing. You're not shooting those bucks rut or not, 200-300 yards from their beds. You're not doing it.
Right, and that's that concentration of trails, or I guess Dan talked about this. It's a convergence of trails. He also talked about this community scrape.
And that's a big one, because I can't tell you how many big bucks I've shot on those scrapes, and this even gets outside of rut. I mean, I've done it in early season.
Yeah.
Those scrapes, that what's going on is when there's a lot of big buck bedding in a small area, there's going to be one community scrape where they all stage. They come out and they smell who's been there, who's doing what, and that's where everything's established. I don't understand everything about it. I just know what goes on.
Yeah.
And that spot is the spot to be. If you find a scrape near bedding, hang a stand.
Yeah. And one thing that you'll find, I think, is unique
You
about
can underline near bedding, because scrapes going through the middle of the woods or on the edge of fields are like hunting a random rub.
right.
You know, a lot of people will say, you know, do you hunt scrapes? Scrapes don't work, or scrapes do work. Well, the difference is where they're hunting them. That's really what it boils down to. It's like anything else. You got to hunt them where they move in daylight.
Right. Well, yeah, this small property that I used to hunt, there would be scrapes you saw it, every 25 yards all along the perimeter of the field. And a lot of that was the smaller immature bucks running in daylight or even doing it at night, and they'd cruise those things. And
Your average
tear them
guy
all
would
up.
go up there and he'd find the heaviest concentration of those and put up a stand.
Right, right, because it's it's really attractive to want to go there and sit over something like that. That's got a
Right.
heavy amount of sign. And the one thing that's interesting about this is that and this is particular to marshes and swamps, but when you're on those transitions and you're looking out over that marsh or swamp into that bedding area, it's amazing how, so it could be dead quiet, but when you hear movement in there, when that deer gets up from a bed or you start to hear chase, it's loud.
Mm-hmm.
There's a significant change in noise, and you can understand the direction of it. And I guess the reason why I bring that up is because someone might be thinking, well, how do you know that buck got up when he did?
Well,
How do you know he was
there's a
giving
thing there
chase?
too, and I don't know if you've noticed it. I'm sure some of our listeners have noticed it, but there's a time period during the day when the wind dies, and there's this calm period right before sunset.
Yes.
That is when, that quiet period then, that all those deer start to rise.
Yeah.
And you start to hear them getting out of the beds. You hear them right where those beds are,
Yeah.
and start to move. And that's repetitive. In that particular area, it's kind of cool, because you're sitting there and you can hear them getting up all around you and coming. And it's like an exciting time, because and it's wet. That area is really wet. There's little humps that they bed on. So as soon as they step off those beds, you hear that slurping, and you can hear them coming. You know, you can hear them moving around, and
You'll hear them start to move. You'll hear them start to expel, air out of their nose and through their mouth. It's weird how calm and still and quiet it is in there that you can actually hear this. And this buck probably bedded, because we found his bed 100 yards, 120 yards from where I was set up on that point. And there was another deer in this picture, and it was a doe that he was given chase to. So you think about that, that doe was moving through that area or bedded further out, and that buck got up and he liked what he smelled, and he was moving through there to investigate. But the key is, though, why did he pick that spot to move to? And I think that's because this convergence of trails and that community scrape. That's why he was going to that spot versus, walking in a different direction.
right.
So,
Well, we've noticed too, even the does and stuff go to those scrapes.
yeah,
Everything's going there, so they're going there to find out what's going on.
yeah,
It's like turning on the news station in the morning. You want to know what's going on? Go to the scrape.
yeah. So, downwind doe bedding, really good. Focus on your buck bedding that, leeward hillsides. We've seen this in hill country. time and time again. Convergence of trails, community scrapes.
I got another one. Don't fall into the bull crap of believing these deer are 10 miles from here because it's rut, or to have new ones in the area and that's what you're hunting, because that's bull crap. They do, and studies will show it, take off and go 10 miles and then come back, right? It's a day or two. Usually you're hunting them in a key spot, and you're going to kill those big bucks by moving around. And we're going to get some arguments here, and we're going to get people going to post on the beast that I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And it's because they hunt in a different manner than I do. And they've had different results. But my results of doing it both ways and hopping around and sitting in the same funnel over and over again, you systematically hunt down that property and hunt the key areas in each section of your property, and you're going to get on much better and bigger and more often bucks during the rut. Believe it or not, they hole up in certain areas. They do. And we've seen that many times. I've seen it many, many times. The older they get, the more they lock into an area. And they might shift that area during rut, and they might expel from that area and go 5 miles and come back. But they've got certain areas they're going to be in. And by shifting yourself around and hopping around, you're eventually going to cross paths with that buck. Sitting in the same spot, when he does come through there, if he does want to shift over there, he's going to smell you been there. He's going to move on, or he's going to go around you. You got to keep hopping around. You got to keep trying different areas.
The good part about moving, and even if you don't get a kill, what you're observing and the intel that you're gaining on that area, you're going to be able to use year after year, because you might observe a mature buck either tending a doe or giving chase to a doe or chasing off smaller bucks in one of those concentrated areas. And maybe for that year you can't get in there and kill them. But that buck and other bucks are going to use that area. Again, there's some reason why the way that the wind is or how the setup is, that history will repeat itself during those rut times. They like going back to those setups. And that's a key thing to remember, because some guys think, well, that's random, that buck was there, I'll never see another buck in that spot again. But
Very little is random about big bucks.
Right.
So let's go back to the spot we were just talking about, in that swamp. Now, you killed that big 10-pointer there. I killed a couple 8-pointers there. Did we kill anything else there? So we got 3 bucks killed there, and I think we've hunted it 6 or 7 times.
Yeah.
3 years.
Yeah.
And that's why it's good.
Yeah.
Most guys camp out there, because you could get action there most any time, but if you camp out there, it ain't going to stay good.
No, you'll soil it.
Right. Those deer come through in the way they do and still use those scrapes because we back off.
Yeah.
Now, you're going to have guys that are going to say, it's rut, I can hunt there every day. And you're going to see that spot go downhill. And you could say it won't. And I can tell you that if I went there and sat there every day during a rut, I would probably be able to kill a decent buck every year. Decent. But if you want to kill the monster, the giant, the old granddaddy, he ain't going to keep coming there if you're camped out there.
Right.
And the reason that spot always seems to have the biggest bucks in the swamp is because we stay out of there till the time is right, and we try to time our hunts with the key time when that spot is hot. That would be a great spot to go opening week when they're coming up out of the swamps into the acorns. It'd be a great time to go in early October when they're just starting to rut. It'd be a great time to go late season when the swamp is thick and the woods are open and they're virgin up. But the best time to go there is when those does are in heat and those bucks are bedding all around there, around those does in heat, and coming up there a little earlier than they usually do. And so we try to time it around hitting it at the peak time and leaving it be and going hunting someplace that ain't near as good that same time period.
Right.
We're not going out there and killing ourselves by stepping on our feet.
Right.
And you got to have the stamina to go hunt someplace that ain't as good.
Right.
Or to try something else.
And stick to your plan. Now, sometimes on public spots, you don't always have the advantage of doing that if you get other hunting pressure, but it is key if you can hold off and stay out of those areas and go into that pre-rut scenario with your established plan based on the stuff that you've patterned from previous
You
years.
get your first sit of the season in that spot
That's all you need.
when it's hot.
Yeah, one sit. You know, so
Yeah, out of about 6 hunts,
yeah, literally
we've killed
Six or
3
s-
big bucks.
Yeah, 6 or 7. Yeah,
Yeah. So about 50% success rate.
yeah,
And I don't think there's been a time we didn't pass one. Or,
yeah. So good. All right, it only took us another 15 minutes to answer that question.
These are each podcast in their own.
Yeah. All right, next question here. I'd like to hear more about farm country buck hunting. So, small timber blocks connected by fence, row type cover. Fields are either agriculture or 8-foot tall scrub and gabs. So, it reminds me of a crossword puzzle on an aerial map. Difficult to hunt bucks effectively. So you
Not really. Simple. The first thing you got to do is get out of the woodlot. That's where everybody goes. When I think about farm country, I can tell you this, that the overall majority of the big bucks I've killed in farm type territory have not been in the woods. They've been on fence lines. They've been bedding around brushy ponds. They've been on a patch of brush in the middle of a field. They've been along a ditch line. They're in some little overlooked spot that everybody misses. I can think about a farm I hunted last year, where a friend took me to do drives. And we went to that farm, we drive through the farm, and the way you go in, you got to drive right through the farm and all the equipment, take this dirt road that's the driveway for the farm, and then go past it to way back where this big wood lot is. And we get in there was tree stands everywhere. We're going to drive this, and he's telling me all these big bucks are in there, and I'm like, really? This is getting pounded,
Yeah.
But we go to drive that, I go to set up on the back side. Now, it's his property, so he's doing things his way. I'm just invited. So I go on the back side, and I see like some brushy trees to set up on. Were you along on that?
I don't know if I was or not.
No. So anyways, I go in those brushy trees, and as soon as I step into those trees, deer jump up and run all over the place. So they're doing that drive, one guy jumps a deer. Where does that deer jump? On an edge in a brushy field that they walk through to doing the drive on a little island in that field that has an oak tree on it. Not one deer came out of that giant wood lot
Yeah.
where everybody thinks they're going to be. And I'm taking note of that, and it's exactly what I expected. So when we get done, I says to the guy driving, and I says, do you mind if I make a suggestion? And he says, no, you sure. And I says, how about the patch by the road? Now, honestly, we didn't jump a deer out of that patch. When we got down there was the biggest buck sign of that whole area was in that patch by the road where nobody goes because you're driven past it, and that's the spots you got to be, is those little patches. In a lot of cases, it doesn't even have a tree you can hunt out of. It's a little dogwood patch in a pasture or something, and along a creek or something, but it's not those big woodlots. Now, when they do bed in big woodlots, say that's what you got for options, and they are bedding in those woodlots, you're going to find them on the downwind side, on the edges, not in the center, looking out over those fields. Wind from the woods, they can smell anything in the woods, they can watch anything coming, and they're going to stare at their food source. So they use their eyes a lot in farm country. When they bed interior in woodlots, it's going to be at an edge, where there's a little pothole of water or something in that woodlot, or there's a elevation change. You either got a hill they're bedding on, or you got a spot where elevation goes from oaks and hardwoods into softwoods and pines and poplars and tamaracks.
Yeah.
And those transitions are going to hold the deer. But most of what you find in farm type country is going to be out in those fields. It's going to be on those tree lines. It's going to be off to the side where nobody looks.
Yeah.
Walk the edges. Be in the edge of the woodlot, the edge of the tree lines and stuff. And I think about Dave's farm. A lot of times you pull in the farm, nobody goes over to the far right and goes on that tree line. And a lot of times I see big bucks bedded along that tree line. Just because nobody goes over there and they can see the whole field.
Yeah.
They're hard to hunt that way, but that's what you got to look at. Farms are a lot more set up for the observation. You just get up high and watch everything before you move in. See what you got to see, and even if you don't kill the buck, you'll learn a thing or two about the property. You'll see that those big ones that enter those fields and stuff aren't necessarily coming from those woodlots. They're coming from someplace a little more unexpected.
Right. And, you know, based on the description of what you gave here, you know, you're really talking about these grid-like spots. You know, maybe you have a woodlot here and here, but it's what Dan's referring to is these edges. You know, these edges that are going to hold thickness here, or maybe there's a cornfield here and there's an island of trees right here, all surrounded by corn or all surrounded by beans. It's very similar to the swamp or marsh scenario where that one thicket
Let me erase that. Let me do a map.
might be holding it up.
Okay, so here's your road. Here's your farmhouse, right? Looks like a house, don't it?
Sort of.
So you pull in here, and you got some tree lines that come down here, and you got fields that are broken up by tree lines, right? And then back here you got a woodlot, connects to the neighbors. Okay. Here you got more fields, right? Got a woodlot here, right? And so here's your woodlot. Wind comes through like this. I can see him bedding right here, watching the farm. Okay, bedding along here with this wind coming down in some manner from the north. Okay. I can also see him bedding along these field lines. And let's see, you got a T-cross in here, and this is the neighbor's fields, and it gets a little thick here. I can see him right in this little tiny patch of trees that's connecting these. Or you got a spot where it's kind of wet here, so it gets a little wide. Well, here's a spot where nobody comes to this farm, walks along the farm and hunts here. The deer see you coming and everything else, but you could probably swing around and get into over here and come along if those deer are getting up and feeding down towards the fields and stuff. But the thing is, you got to know where they're at. They could be on these tree lines anywhere. They could be in a patch of CRP where it just gets a little thick here with CRP, and a little dogwood growing into the field maybe a little bit that they just go around with the tractor because a tree fell there. That's the kind of stuff where I'm finding those big bucks. This, not so much. I mean, that's not really where I'm seeing them. You get into these farm lot woodlots, and one of the biggest problems is they usually don't do logging on farms.
Yeah.
So this is 100-year-old trees, and you get in here and you can see for a mile.
That's wide open. Yeah.
You know, you have to have some thick cover for deer. And they're going to be on the edges. If they're in here at all, and this is solid, uncut timber that hasn't been cut in 100 years, they're going to be along the edges if they're in there at all. Or if there's a little wet spot in there that's got a different kind of tree, they're going to be on the edges of that or in the middle on an island. But they're not going to be bedding in the middle of open timber. Everybody thinks you got to be in woods, and deer are not woods animals. They're edge animals. Every tree line on here is edge.
Yeah.
And that's what you got to look for.
Your map there reminds me of a spot. Now, I never
I can't
actually...
remind you of anything. It didn't look like anything. It was a bad map.
Now, I never actually watched a buck get up out of this spot, but my assumption is that there was one living there at certain points. Now, this field, we'll just draw it kind of like this. And there was another adjacent field here. Now, the lay of the land, your elevation point was here. Okay, and then
Which way is uphill, which way is downhill?
this is uphill. Okay, so
this is lower.
yeah, so
Okay.
I'll draw that out. Here's your elevation lines here. So this is the top of the hill.
Okay.
Literally the top of the hill is right here. So what was kind of interesting about this is that this spot here was a row of oaks. Okay? This spot here was prickly ash, thick dogwood type stuff, but obviously there's a field edges of dogwood. So you know, you had, this is a thicket. So right at the high point of this, where that thicket was, there was a downed tree, a log that was fallen like this. So what was interesting about this spot is that there was a scrape that I noticed was right here. And then there was various scrapes that ran so often along here. When I was turkey hunting, in the spring I was walking along this thing just kind of figuring out a spot I wanted to sit, and I stumbled upon this spot right here. And what was interesting about it is that there was a corridor that was tunneled through this thicket, and it wrapped around this log, and it went in, and there was a bed right behind this log.
Mm-hmm.
Now this spot right here was on a fence line. Oaks were right here. Scrape was right here. From this bed, this whole lower part, where typically, you know, I'd seen deer funnel out of these lows, you could see this whole backside. If the buck rotated or turned its head, it could look, now it dropped in elevation here, but it could see this entire section of this field on this side. And, you know, obviously this elevated up so it got higher to the highest point here. But what was interesting about that spot is it was super thick. Like if you sat in there, you know, and hunkered
Right.
down, you were totally covered up. And it was literally only as wide as this room that we're sitting in.
Yep, I see that all the time.
So, yeah, now I never actually had a chance to hunt that
Mhm.
bed, but it makes me think how difficult it would be to try to get close to that thing, because he could literally, depending on how the wind came across there, he could smell you, and he could see in every
Yeah,
direction.
you gotta wait for the right wind and come maybe in from like up here and down to here into these oaks. But the thing is, now how do you hunt that buck if you don't even know he exists?
Right.
If you're hunting this over here, this big wood lot, right?
Yeah.
You're just tipping him off and he's just paying attention to you laughing.
Yeah.
You have to sit something like this with an observation. You have to see that deer there, know he's there, or have found a bed like you did,
Yeah.
and see it how he comes out of there like you did. I mean, you did that during turkey season or scouting,
Yeah.
but you can also do that by observation.
Right.
And a lot of times you can't really tell if a bed is good or not by just scouting in spring or whatever.
Right.
Sometimes you need to actually sit, you know, come up here, climb up a tree, and you got the wind going this way, and watch. And maybe you got to try different winds because he might not be there on every wind. But you have to watch this thing in order to know. And it's hard to get that across. I mean, that podcast I did with the Open Air Project guys the other day,
Yeah.
the one guy says, you know, I really like what you're saying about observing. He goes, but man, I have a hard time doing that. It's a wasted hunt. It's not a wasted hunt. I mean, a wasted hunt is coming here, sitting here when the buck's bedding here and letting them know you're there. That's a wasted hunt.
Right.
You know, you need to really figure out what's going on before you move in and bumble around, you know. Nothing's a wasted hunt if you get something out of it.
Right.
You know, it doesn't hurt to sit there and watch. You can even do it just before season. The week before season, if you're not sitting in tree stands watching what you're doing, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the best time to be out there, the week before, doing your observations, because you're getting an observation sit, and you're not burning a hunt.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I mean, I think some of you guys that are really interested in this, it's just fun to do. Like, you get to be out in nature anyways, and think about it. If you make an assumption, like, again, I never got to hunt this spot, but if I make an assumption that that guy's living there, and maybe he's living there during early season because he's in such close proximity to these dropping oaks. Okay, maybe he's there during rut because depending on the wind, he can scent check anything that's coming out of bedding over here or this scrape. He sees it, he can go give chase. But the only way you're going to know that, yeah, and this is just, the more I think about this, how difficult it is, because you're so low here, you can't set up an observe here. You're too low in the field, so you'd have to sneak to this little edge or this little edge where he can't see you, and the wind, is blowing, so he don't tip him off with scent, and get up way high, like way as high as you can.
Every time you find one of those mature buck beds, when you look at it, you would have thought that farm was easy to hunt, but you see that bed and you're like, holy crap,
Yeah.
he's got me.
Right.
And it's every one of them like that. But where I got an advantage over most people is I've been doing this so long and looking at this stuff so long, I'd probably walk onto your property, look at that, and just go straight over there and hunt.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the first thing I do is be like, let's just check out what's in these oaks. And I'd creep up here without ever even looking, ever doing an observation, and walk down this and find a sign coming out of it and set up just from a distance from seeing it.
Yeah.
And that's, you get that eye from looking at this stuff long enough.
Right.
People have it already ingrained in their heads that they have to be in this wood lot and they have to hunt every day.
Yeah.
You got to get that uningrained.
Yeah.
You have to change your ways.
Yeah, spend your time studying and doing your homework on the spot that you want to hunt, and you could hunt it less and probably have more success. So, all right.
Hunt less, kill more. That could be a t-shirt.
All right, here's one. So, talking points on how to teach bed hunting, hill country, and the sport of deer hunting to new youth hunters. So, they're young and starting out with this. How do you teach them?
Yeah, it would go into the conversation we had before the show.
Yes. Yes.
Where me and you were talking about that. I think kids are getting taught incorrectly. I think they're getting this idea that they have to join a team or push products and stuff. You see these kids driving around with 50 stickers on their truck from every product out there, or their signatures on a forum underneath their name with every product they use, like it's an endorsement for those products. I would say if for a kid, you need to just go out and hunt. Have fun. Don't worry about what other people think. Don't worry about being part of a team or anything. Just go have fun. If I think about the best days of my life hunting, it's when I was growing up, didn't have a clue about anything. I was just stumbling around hunting. Man, those were fun days. I mean, and that you need that. You need that in your childhood growing up. You need that base